Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Great to be here.
Today we're embarking on a really thrilling expedition, actually, down to the hidden world beneath the waves. A world crisscrossed by these silent pathways that, well, they power our modern lives. Submarine communications cables.
It's easy to forget they're even there, isn't it? But absolutely vital.
Totally. Just imagine the sheer audacity back in the day, stretching these threads of connection across vast, untamed oceans.
It's an incredible story.
That's what we're diving into today. We'll trace their amazing evolution, from the first tentative whispers of the telegraph.
Right up to the lightning-fast flow of the internet today.
Exactly. We'll look at the vital role they play, the ingenious tech behind it all, and get this, some truly surprising tales from the ocean floor.
Oh, there are definitely some good stories down there.
We've got a real treasure trove of information to explore, so let's dive in.
Sounds good. We take it for granted, don't we? Instantly connecting with someone on the other side of the planet.
Completely. Click a button, send an email.
But beneath that seamless experience lies this remarkable feat of engineering, just relentless human innovation.
They're not just wires, are they?
Not at all. They're the lifeblood of our global information network. Truly.
Okay, let's journey back. Mid-19th century. The telegraph is this brand new marvel.
And suddenly this, audacious idea starts bubbling up, reaching across the Atlantic Ocean.
Samuel Morse himself, right.
Oh.
The brain behind the American telegraph. He was an early believer.
He was, and he even did an experiment, a pretty fascinating one, in New York Harbor, 1842.
What did he do?
Dipped a wire, sheathed in tarred hemp and India rubber into the water, and guess what?
It worked.
It worked. And around the same time over in Britain, Wheatstone was doing similar trials in Swansea Bay.
Wow. So like parallel thinking, dreaming of this connected world.
Seems like it, but they quickly hit a snag, a fundamental challenge.
Which was?
You can't just drop a bare wire into salt water. The current just dissipates, leaks away.
Ah, right. Insulation.
Yeah.
That became critical.
Absolutely critical. The science of materials. India rubber was one early attempt. Moritz von Jacobi, a Prussian engineer, tried it.
But then came this other stuff. Gutta percha.
Gutta percha. Wonderful name.
Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It does. It's a sap from a tree in Southeast Asia. Came to Europe in 1842. A Scottish surgeon saw locals using it, thought it might be useful.
For surgery.
Initially, yes. But people like Faraday and Wheatstone saw its real potential as an electrical insulator.
And that changed everything for underwater cables.
Pretty much. By 1845, they were already talking about using it for a cable across the English Channel.
Because it was, waterproof?
Malleable.
Exactly. You could melt it, apply it to wires, and it formed a pretty robust barrier against seawater. A real game changer for the time.
So the first actual successful underwater use.
That was William Siemens, 1847, across the Rhine River. Then a 3-kilometer test off Folkestone in 49. That built confidence.
Okay, so the stage is set. Commercial attempts next. Right. John Watkins Brett tried a bare wire across the channel in 1850. Didn't go well, unsurprisingly.
You'd think they'd learned by then.
Well, sometimes failures teach the best lessons. He got another chance, and in 1851, his submarine telegraph company laid a protected cable, armored.
And this time?
This time, it worked. That short hop across the channel was, honestly, a monumental leap.
It proved it could be done on a larger scale.
Precisely. And it really kicked things off. The 1850s saw this rapid expansion.
Where'd they go next?
Great Britain got linked to Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, cables across the belts in Denmark. The world was shrinking fast.
It's amazing to think about. Real-time communication starting to spread.
By 1853, the first Irish link was stable. Then the Electric and International Telegraph Company laid 2 cables across the North Sea.
2. Ambitious.
And here's a neat detail. The ship they used, the Monarch, was the first ever vessel with permanent cable laying gear built in.
Wow. A dedicated ship. That must have made a huge difference.
A fundamental difference in how efficiently they could operate.
And then, the Crimean War. How did that impact things?
It really highlighted this strategic importance. First, major conflict where telegraphy played a decisive role.
How so?
An underwater cable was laid from Varna to Crimea in 1855. News reached London in hours, not weeks.
That's game-changing for warfare and politics.
Absolutely. A powerful demonstration of near-instant communication.
Which naturally fueled even bigger dreams. The Atlantic.
The big one. Cyrus Westfield was the main driver. His first attempt in 1858. Well, it worked, but only for about a month.
Close but no cigar. Frustrating.
Immensely frustrating, I imagine, but the ambition was huge. The real success came in 1866.
What changed?
Better technology, better understanding of the physics, and the Great Eastern.
Ah, yes, the colossal steamship.
Colossal is right. That permanent transatlantic cable was a global sensation. And the Great Eastern wasn't done. It later laid the first cable to India in 1870.
Incredible ship.
Yeah.
So that 1866 success really cemented Britain's position.
Oh, absolutely. From the 1850s right up to 1911, they dominated the North Atlantic cable scene.
Why Britain, specifically?
A combination of factors, really. Willing entrepreneurs with deep pockets.
And a massive colonial empire needing communication links.
Exactly. Huge demand. Plus, the government saw the strategic value.
The all-red line idea? Connecting the empire via British-controlled cables.
Precisely that. It wasn't just commercial, it was national security. When World War I broke out.
Let me guess, they cut the German cables.
Immediately. One of their first acts. Severed Germany's overseas communication instantly. Shows how vital they considered it.
Makes sense. And economically, big advantages.
Huge. Trading companies got near real-time market info. The government could coordinate globally much faster.
And geography helped too. Ireland and Newfoundland being the shortest hop.
That played a part, yes. Made it more viable for them to establish and control those routes. Their dominance was staggering. By 1896, they owned 24 out of the 30 cable ships in the world.
24 out of 30. Wow.
And their reach wasn't just Atlantic. They pushed eastwards, too, through the 1860s and 70s.
Towards India, Asia.
Yep. India linked up a key connection to Saudi Arabia in 1863, then Singapore, East Asia, Australia.
Companies like the Eastern Telegraph Company.
Became global giants. Its spin-off handled the extension to China and Australasia. By 1872, Australia was linked to Bombay. By 76, London to New Zealand.
Just think of the engineering and logistics involved back then. Mind-boggling.
Truly incredible for the era. Then came the Pacific Challenge.
Another vast ocean to cross.
And they did, early 20th century. U.S. mainland to Hawaii, Guam to the Philippines, operational in 1902-1903.
The all-red line reached across the Pacific, too.
It did. Segment completed in 1902. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. Japan joined in 1906. The world was getting seriously wired.
The telephone calls across Pacific came much later.
Much later. 1964 for the first Hawaii-Japan telephone cable. Then more advanced systems like Compaq and Seacom. Regenerative systems like the North Pacific cable didn't arrive until 91.
Let's talk about how they actually built these early cables. The construction itself sounds fascinating.
It was complex, layer upon layer. At the core, multiple copper strands.
The conductors.
Right. Wrapped meticulously in India rubber first, then a thick layer of that wonder material, gutta percha,
Insulation.
the primary insulation, then an outer armor of heavy iron or steel wires, like an underwater suit of armor.
To protect against rocks, anchors, maybe even curious sea creatures.
Exactly. And near shore, where risks were higher, they added even more protective layers.
Like a flexible armored sea serpent.
A good analogy. And gutta percha, despite one technical drawback, a high dielectric constant was almost perfect for insulating those early telegraph signals.
And companies specialize in making these.
Oh, yes. Big names like W.T. Henley's and the India Rubber Gutta Percha and Telegraph Works Company, masters of the craft. There was even innovation within that, like William Hooper's vulcanized rubber core.
But gutta percha wasn't the final word in insulation.
No, the next big leap was polyethylene, introduced in the 1930s.
Why the change?
Better electrical properties, better water resistance. But initially, it was mostly for military use.
So the first submarine cable using polyethylene.
Not until 1945, across the English Channel, post-WWII. Interestingly, the U.S. military had been playing with rubber variations in the 20s. John T. Blake developed a deep proteinized rubber that was much better against water absorption.
Okay, so materials science kept advancing. But back to the seabed. Yeah. It wasn't just inanimate objects causing problems, was it? Sea life got involved.
Oh, definitely. A surprisingly active adversary. Tiny shipworms, Teredo would bore right into the insulation.
Like termites of the sea.
Pretty much. Other critters like Xylophaga could damage the layers too, and then you had sharks.
Sharks biting cables.
Apparently, taking exploratory bites, sawfish too, attacking with their rostrums. But the best story...
Uh-oh, I sense a good one coming.
...is from 1873, Persian Gulf. Get this. A large whale tried to scrape barnacles off itself by rubbing against the cable where it went over an underwater cliff.
Okay.
It got its tail tangled in the loops, hopelessly entangled, and tragically, it drowned.
No way. A whale took out a cable.
Took out the cable and itself. The repair ship, the Amber Witch, had to winch up the cable with the poor whale still attached.
That is quite the story. Talk about unexpected challenges.
You couldn't make it up. But beyond wildlife, there were big electrical challenges too, especially with early long-distance cables. Bandwidth was a major issue.
Meaning they couldn't send much information quickly.
Exactly. No repeaters, no signal boosters back then. So over thousands of miles of copper, the resistance, the capacitance, the inductance, it all smeared the signal.
Like shouting into that thick fog we mentioned.
A perfect analogy. The pulses got distorted, limiting speed to maybe 10, 12 words per minute across the Atlantic. Frustratingly slow.
Who figured out why this was happening?
Early pioneers like Francis Ronalds and Latimer Clark noticed the signal slowing down. Michael Faraday explained the role of capacitance, the cable acting like a giant capacitor with the seawater.
Which led to debates on how to fix it.
Big debates. EOW Whitehouse thought just cranking up the voltage would work. William Thomson, later Lord Kelvin, argued for bigger cables and a proper scientific approach.
And Thomson was right.
Thomson was right. His mathematical model of cable physics was crucial. Plus, he invented a super-sensitive galvanometer to detect the faint signals.
So he cracked the code for reliable long-distance telegraphy.
He laid the scientific foundation. Later, Oliver Heaviside added inductance to the equations, which was key for faster data and eventually voice transmission.
Ah, telephony. Speaking across the ocean, that must have been the next dream.
It was, certainly from the 1920s, but the tech just wasn't there for the existing cables.
They tried, though.
There was an attempt in the early 30s with a pupinized cable using loading coils, but the Great Depression killed the funding.
So when did the first telephone call cross the Atlantic via cable?
Not until 1955-56 with TT1, a huge milestone. But initially, it could only carry 36 phone calls at once.
36.
Yeah.
Seems tiny now.
Right. These were coaxial cables using frequency multiplexing and powered repeaters with vacuum tubes along the way. Surprisingly reliable tubes, actually.
Are those old coaxial cables still down there?
Many are, yeah. But totally obsolete for data traffic. Some get used for scientific stuff now, like monitoring earthquakes.
And that cable tech even got used for oil pipelines.
Amazingly, yes. During WWII, Siemens Brothers adapted it for Operation Pluto pipelines under the ocean. Supplied fuel for the D-Day follow-up. Ingenious adaptation.
Incredible versatility.
Okay.
That brings us toward the modern era, the big shift to optics.
Exactly. The age of fiber optics, starting seriously in the 1980s. TAT-8, the first transatlantic fiber cable, went live in 1988.
And instead of electricity through copper, it's light through glass.
Pulses of light through incredibly pure glass fibers, thinner than a human hair. A single cable can have many pairs of these fiber.
And the capacity difference.
Astronomical. Especially after erbium-doped fiber amplifiers, EDFAs, came along in 95.
Optical amplifiers.
Right. Boost the light signal directly. That plus wavelength division multiplexing, WDM.
Sending multiple colors of light down the same fiber.
Pretty nicely. Suddenly you go from dozens of calls to terabits of data per second. Mind-boggling increase.
How are these modern marvels powered? Those amplifiers need juice, right?
They do. Constant direct current is sent down a central conductor in the cable. High voltage, thousands of volts, up to 15,000 VDC supplied by power feed equipment, PFE, at the landing stations.
And the fiber itself is so clear the repeaters can be really far apart.
Over 100 kilometers between repeaters is common now. That's how low the signal loss is in modern fiber. There are even unrepeated cables stretching hundreds of kilometers now.
Laying these must be even more delicate than the old copper ones.
Absolutely. Needs specialized ships. AT&T invested heavily in them. They're like floating labs, laying the cables super straight from the stern, highly maneuverable.
And the network design evolved too, not just point-to-point anymore.
Right. Branching units, SBUs, let one cable serve multiple spots. Self-healing rings for redundancy if one path breaks, traffic reroutes.
Mesh networks too, for even more resilience.
Exactly. Fast switching finds alternative paths instantly if there's a fault. Speeds kept climbing 200 gigabits per second across the Atlantic, demonstrated by 2012, up from 40 GBPs just a few years earlier.
What about latency, the delay?
Always a factor. Fastest transatlantic routes are under 60 milliseconds round trip now, which is close to the theoretical limit for an all-sea route. Land routes could be faster sometimes, but add complexity.
And the fiber tech itself keeps improving. You mentioned pure silica core.
PCSF, yeah. Super low loss. Plus managing things like chromatic dispersion, where different colors travel at slightly different speeds.
WDM has limits, though, based on amplifier bandwidth.
It does. You need clever amplifiers, preamplifiers, sometimes techniques like Raman amplification or ROPAs, remote optical preamplifiers to push the boundaries, especially for unrepeated systems.
And beyond WDM, what's next for squeezing more data through?
Spatial division multiplexing, SDM, is a big one. Basically, packing more fiber pairs into the same cable, more lanes on the highway.
Combine that with better modulation and DWDM.
And capacity keeps growing. It's a constant race.
You mentioned the open cable concept. What's that about?
It's about separating the design of the wet plant, the cable, repeaters, branching units underwater from the dry plant, the shore-based equipment.
The SLTE, the transponders.
Right. It means you can upgrade the electronics at the landing stations, the SLTE, with its transponders and RODMs for flexible signal routing without having to replace the hugely expensive underwater cable itself.
Makes sense. More flexible, upgradable, and those landing stations, CLSs, are the crucial gateways.
Absolutely. Connecting the undersea world to the land networks. And they use tools like COTDR to find faults out in the deep.
All this tech sounds expensive.
Extremely. A modern transoceanic system, several $100 million. Easily.
Who pays for it?
Historically, consortia of operators, like with TAT-8. Then in the late 90s, a boom in private cables, followed by some busts. Today, you see both models, plus giants like Tata Communications with their global TGN network.
And the focus shifted from Atlantic to Pacific.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, yes, driven by growth in Asia. More recently, connecting the developing world, like the Seacom cable, to East Africa.
Though not without challenges, like piracy delays.
Right. It's risky investing in these massive projects. Long distances, tough seabed conditions. Capacity often only gets bought after it's built and working.
Now let's talk about the gaps.
Yeah.
Antarctica, still unconnected.
Still the only continent without a submarine cable connection. The conditions are just too extreme.
Minus 80 degrees C, moving ice sheets.
Exactly. Technically and economically prohibitive so far. They rely on satellites, which are much slower and have far less capacity. Local communication is mostly radio.
But the Arctic, that's changing. Melting ice opening possibilities.
It is. Shorter potential routes between continents. Projects like Polar Express or Far North Fiber are being explored.
But huge environmental concerns, right?
Yeah.
Delicate ecosystem, ice hazards.
Big concerns. Plus, the regulatory framework up there isn't fully developed for this kind of infrastructure. It's complex.
Okay, let's just reiterate the sheer importance. 99% of transoceanic data.
99%. Internet, finance, military, everything. Satellites handle a tiny fraction. Cables are faster, cheaper per bit, and have vastly more capacity, terabits versus gigabits.
So vital for national security, national economies.
Absolutely. Australia calls them essential national infrastructure, creates protection zones. Disruptions, like the Tonga volcano cutting their cable, devastating.
And demand is only growing. 5G, IoT, AI.
All fueling the need for more capacity, plus potential future uses like embedding environmental sensors for tsunami warnings, smart cables.
And internationally, cloud computing, military data.
All rely heavily on these cables, and control over them becomes a geopolitical lever. Think China's digital Silk Road. It fuels competition.
But this critical infrastructure, it's vulnerable, isn't it?
It is. Various threats. Accidental damage is the most common fishing gear. Anchors, earthquakes too, even those shark bites we mentioned.
But intentional damage is a concern. Organized crime.
It's a growing concern. Historically, most breaks weren't natural events. Burying cables helps against accidents, but they still happen frequently, and intentional acts are possible.
How vulnerable are they technically?
Their remoteness makes monitoring hard. Unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, could potentially cause covert damage. Even low-tech attacks in shallow water, like diverse cutting cables near shore.
Choke points must be particularly risky, and the locations are public.
Many general locations are known, yes. And there have even been reports of cable sections being stolen for materials in places like Vietnam.
So what are the technical countermeasures?
Deeper burial, tougher protective casings, using UUVs for monitoring, safety zones with penalties, more surveillance. Collaboration between states and the private sector is key.
But enforcement in remote areas is tough.
Very tough.
And repair. How do you fix a cable thousands of meters down?
Specialized ships, specialized techniques. First, pinpoint the break using electrical measurements like SSTDR from shore, down to a few meters, often. Then the repair ship goes out, uses grapples or ROVs to lift the broken ends.
Then they splice in a new piece.
Exactly. A highly skilled job joining the fibers perfectly. Then they laid the extra length back down in a U shape to avoid stress. Halifax was historically a major hub for these ships and developing repair tech, like the cable plow. Some of those ships even helped with the Titanic recovery.
Wow. Okay, shifting to cyber threats, that must be huge.
Paramount. Sophisticated cyber attacks are a major risk for financial gain, espionage, extortion, even hybrid warfare.
Like ransomware.
Data theft.
All possible. And there aren't really binding international cybersecurity standards specifically for these cables, which makes defense harder. Attribution is trying too.
Cyber espionage, specifically. Tapping the data.
Tapping attempts, hacking the network management systems, targeting the landing stations. Motives can be strategic or economic. Remote access portals and centralized management can create vulnerabilities.
You saw cable cutting in WWI, wiretapping in the Cold War, like Operation Ivy Bells. History shows it's always been a target. End-to-end encryption is the main defense against data interception itself.
What other cybersecurity measures are used?
Access controls, network monitoring. But it's mainly focused on the data, less on the physical security and remote parts. Needs a multi-layered approach. Physical security, cyber defense, international cooperation, legal frameworks. Stronger government tech collaboration is needed.
And the geopolitical angle seems increasingly tense.
Very much so. While fishing accidents are common, there's worry that fishing vessels could be used as cover for intentional damage in geopolitical maneuvering.
Like those suspicions around Russian trawlers near damaged cables.
Exactly. Incidents like that, plus historical examples, raise flags, potential links to hybrid warfare targeting critical infrastructure. Even non-state actors could use disruption for economic warfare.
And those recent Baltic Sea breaks, sabotage suggested.
That's what the German defense minister implied, yes. It shows how these incidents are now viewed as serious national security threats.
So countermeasures involved.
More international cooperation, like through the ICPC. But tensions, like U.S.-China relations or disputes in the South China Sea, complicate things. NATO has increased patrols in the Baltic after recent events.
Finally, the legal side. UNCLOS governs this.
The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea is the main framework. It allows laying cables in international waters and requires some protection against shipping accidents.
But it's not enough for modern threats.
Not really. It lacks specifics on intentional damage, cyber attacks in international waters. Plus, key states like the U.S. haven't ratified it. Many domestic laws are lacking too. The old 1884 Cable Convention is outdated. Jurisdiction and enforcement are weak.
So legal fixes could include
Amending UNCLOS, strengthening domestic laws, multi-level governance, applying principles of state responsibility, aligning national laws, setting up response protocols, clarifying military roles.
But getting international agreement is hard.
Very hard. Treaty complexity, need for cooperation, lack of domestic laws, evolving threats, and sometimes, frankly, a lack of political will hinders progress.
Okay, one last area. The environment. Are these cables a danger to marine life?
It's a consideration, especially with more being laid. Installation, like plowing, disturbs the seabed temporarily.
Affecting organisms living there?
It can rework sediment, displace things. Long-term impact might be limited, but behavioral disturbances are possible. Interestingly, cables can also act as artificial reefs on soft bottoms, attracting some species. Maybe slight temperature changes too? Routing tries to avoid sensitive areas now.
What about entanglement? We heard the whale story.
That's a real risk, especially for large animals. Can damage the cable and harm or kill the animal. Burial helps mitigate this in shallower waters.
And fishing gear interaction.
Bottom trawling is a major risk to the cables. Can snag and break them. Could potentially release fluids if older cables are damaged. Ironically, dense cable areas sometimes deter heavy trawling, offering some fauna protection.
Do the cables themselves pollute? Materials.
They're made of fibers, plastics, steel, sometimes dielectric fluids. Damage could release substances. Installation can also stir up buried sediment pollutants. Modern designs aim to minimize harmful materials, and impact assessments are standard.
What about noise or electromagnetic fields?
Installation machinery makes noise, which could disturb animals relying on sound. But it's usually localized and temporary. Modern fiber cables don't emit significant electromagnetic fields. Older copper ones did, but the impact is still studied.
Well, it really has been a deep dive. from those first gutta-percha telegraph lines.
To today's terabit fiber optic networks underpinning everything. It's an incredible, mostly unseen world down there.
We've covered amazing engineering, geopolitical intrigue, even run-ins with whales. These aren't just wires, they're lifelines.
Absolutely. Facing this complex web of tech challenges, security threats, environmental factors, it's constantly evolving.
And thinking about Antarctica still unconnected due to those brutal conditions, it really puts the whole endeavor into perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. Highlights the extremes these systems operate in elsewhere. Makes you wonder what innovation might finally connect it.
The constant cycle of innovation is maybe the most striking thing, always pushing boundaries for capacity, security, sustainability.
Driven by our insatiable demand for connection and data, it's a story that's far from over.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this underwater adventure. We hope it's given everyone a new appreciation for this hidden network.
Hopefully spark some curiosity, too.
Absolutely. What stood out most to you, our listeners? It's such a vast topic, so many fascinating currents still to explore. Thanks for tuning in to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast.